Hey, what's happening? It's JP today. One shot of life, really video 3, and I did the overview of the Razor 4 to 24 last week, and I definitely have to do a more in-depth video on that. But I was thinking over the week something that I get asked often, and it's by family and friends, and it's like, hey, how do you shoot? How are you comfortable with shooting deer or animals? Out 300, 400, 500 yards, and even further. And the answer is pretty simple. Over the years, the technology is incredible of what we have for ballistics, and so really, what this video is for is if you've ever been hunting and haven't shot a deer at 300 yards because you won't feel comfortable pulling that trigger, then hit the like and subscribe button, because I'm going to show you a cheap trick on a cell phone. And there's some other tools, and what I foresee is doing a series on this to progressively get a little bit more advanced. But I'm going to try to start it off at its basic form. Like, you have a rifle, and then you have a cell phone, and then you have a box of ammo that gives you at least a starting point. And so what I have in front of me today, this is pretty much been my go-to hunting rifle the last couple years. This is a SIG Cross. It's a 6.5 Creedmoor. And kind of going back to front, you've got the folding stock. I really like the Cross because my daughter has shot deer with this the last 2 years. It's got an adjustable length of pull, it's got adjustable cheek height, and it's toolless. It's so I can do it in the deer stand with her if we both want to shoot the gun. And so really become a fan of this weapon for specifically whitetail hunting with the 6.5 Creedmoor. On top, I've got a Vortex Razor LHT 4.5 to 22. This is a first focal plane scope. That's important, and we'll talk a little bit about first focal plane and second focal plane. And then this scope is in mils, so I like mils. Almost every single one of my scopes. I think if you saw my duty gun versus competition rifle, I keep everything in mils except for that one BDC on that Razor 1 to 10. And so this thing's sitting in ADM rings, American Defense Manufacturing rings, and then I've got a spot to put a red dot up top, which is nice if you're hunting and you're going to be somewhere maybe in the woods where it's close up. You got that 1x red dot capability there. I've got a Area 419 Arca rail. I like the Arca rail just from the bipod standpoint. It also increases the flat surface area on the bottom of my rifle, and this one's just attaches via M-lock. And if you're in a blind, you're hunting, shooting off a shooting rail or whatever, it's just more surface area that gives you a little bit more stability, even if you're not using a bipod. It's an 18-inch barrel on this, so it's pretty compact. Works out really well if I'm in the deer stand or I'm in a blind or somewhere where I want a little bit more maneuverability, especially because I pretty much only hunt with suppressors. I haven't hunted without a suppressor in well over a decade, and that's Silencer Omega. It's been great. So what are we really trying to do here? So I've shot long range competitions. I've shot with some of the best shooters in the world that have, I've been really fortunate to learn a lot from. And I've loved long range shooting from a very early age. But I will tell you right now that, with this gun, if I go hunting with it, shooting 400 yards, I'm not thinking about, that being a tough shot, because I've put the time in and I know what this rifle is capable of, and I know it's dialed. And so I'm going to try to teach you a little bit today in the kind of first part of the series on how you would do that. And so what do you need to take your hunting rifle and then go make a 500 yard or a 400 yard shot? I think you need quality rings, and then it's the foundational piece. This is a torque wrench, and making sure that you're torquing these rings to the manufacturer's specifications, so your scope, you start off in a good spot. And so different torque specs for your top mounting rings, and then the rings or the screws that mount it to the base. Whatever rings you go with, they'll likely have the torque specs included if they're any type of quality rings. So make sure you follow that. Normally, I think about 18 inch pounds on the top, and we're talking inch pounds, not foot pounds, so don't break out your friggin' 3/8 or 1/2 inch torque wrench on this thing. And then maybe, you normally like 40 to 50 for your side rings. And then it's the simple piece to this that's people miss, right? Your rings, sliding them all the way forward in the spot where they lock to the base. So this part of the ring and this part of the ring, making sure they're pushed against the slots for the Picatinny rail. And that just helps recoil, so your rings are not shifting under recoil as you shoot the gun over time. And then adjusting your eye relief, right? So how far is like the scope away from your eye? That is critically important, right? You've got, before you tighten this thing up, you will have room to move the scope, typically forward and backwards for little micro adjustments, and then you've got slots, or most rifle mounts, you can move them forward or rearward. You can see where mine are centered, and the scope is largely centered in the center of those rings. And then finally, it's setting your diopter, so your scope. This one has a locking ring right here, and the ocular housing here turns clockwise and counterclockwise. So follow your instructions. If you've got a parallax, it'll probably say something like set that to infinity, and then point it at a white wall until you get the reticle in focus, especially if you're not looking past. So you would just do that rapidly, kind of opening and shutting your eye, making sure your eye is not adjusting and accounting for it, because it'll kind of solve the focus problem itself. But the instructions are, like, you buy the scope, the instructions on how to do that are in there, and there's a bunch of videos to talk you through that. We talked first focal plane and second focal plane. I think that I'll show you a video on my phone, which is a great demonstration, and then I'll show you another video at some point where so I'll use the app that we're going to go into, and then I'll show you real life, like a trigger cam video through the scope where I'm shooting a deer, and you can see how that scope is on the lowest magnification in that case, which is 4.5 power. And this scope has two other features, well, really three, I think, that are important to cover. One is that video I just described. I'll throw it up now with the hunting. I use the illuminated reticle when I run the really low powers, because the reticle is not a first focal plane. As you zoom in on the scope, the reticle enlarges, and as you zoom out, the reticle becomes smaller, but your holds, your stadia lines, how that affects the bullet drop, always remains the same. If you have a second focal plane scope, the reticle stays the same size as you zoom in on your magnification. Okay, a lot of people like that for hunting, and it's great. For my daughter, that's probably the way to go. If I was going to just build her a hunting rifle, put a second focal plane scope on it, and then it has like an illuminated center dot that may be even great, like better for her to use. And so we'll cover why, like, very briefly, advantages between first focal plane and second focal plane, and I'll use the app to show you that. This one also has parallax on the side, so I'll make sure I get some B-roll and show you kind of the lines, and that's basically keeping the image and the reticle in focus, at different distances, and it is a very important feature. If you have a scope that doesn't have that, it's probably got a parallax set out to further out yardage-wise or infinity, and that way the scope is trying to do the best at all ranges that it can. And then finally, on this scope, I've got locking turrets, adjustable turrets. So that's going to be important in a minute when we talk about the how to set this gun up and using the app. And so let's jump into that. So you bought a gun, you have mounted a scope, you've bought a decent set of rings, I hope, because please do that. You bought a decent scope. Whether you bought a scope, the reticle matters. In my opinion, the reticle is important. It doesn't need to be crazy busy if you don't want to use all the features of it, but if you just have a pure crosshair reticle, then where I'm going to show you towards the end of this video is all you can really do is kind of hold over, and I'll show you. The app does a good job at least showing you the height in which you have to do that. But you don't have any you don't have any reference point below the reticle, the center point of the reticle, if you don't have any other hold lines. So you can get a bullet drop compensating or a BDC reticle, and there's a ton of great scopes that have those for hunting. And then the app that I'll go in will show you that. Or you can dial. And so this is like, if if I show you in a minute, you know, you can actually dial your hole where you can maintain holding center, the center of your crosshairs, even though because you've dialed the elevation into the shot. And so with that being said, all right, we're gonna hop into this GeoBallistics app. I'm gonna screen record to go along with us. And we're gonna walk through, I've got a gun, quality stuff. I've got a box of ammunition. The box of ammunition will typically, like this Federal Terminal Ascent does, it has a piece where on 6.5 Creedmoor, it's showing me at the velocity for this is 2,800 feet per second. And so that's a starting point on the box. That is not the real world velocity that your rifle is gonna shoot. But it's good. That's normally for like a 24 or 26, it's a longer barrel, and as you shorten your barrel, like on this SIG Cross with an 18-inch barrel, your velocity is going down. So your bullet's just not traveling as fast. And so, you know, there's other tools like this Garmin Chrono, and this is really cool if you have access to a chronograph, or your friend does, or you have one, then you can dial this in even better. But let's say I have a box of ammo, I've got my smartphone, there's multiple apps. I'm gonna use GeoBallistics, there's Chair Gun Elite, there's Applied Ballistics, a bunch of good ones have figured this out. But we're using GeoBallistics. So 2,800 feet per second. We know it's not going that because I've got a shorter barrel, so you can get on Google, or you can try to figure out like some rough barrel math of, hey, my barrel is 6 inches shorter than the barrel that they tested this with. Where do I think that, you know, leads from a feet per second standpoint? And then you can enter in a more educated guess than what the box says. But now I'm in the app. So I've opened the GeoBallistics app on my phone, and then I'll try to, you know, put it up on the screen here. And I'm gonna click on edit profile. All right, so in this case, SIG Cross, so if you're following along with me, it's 6.5 Creedmoor. I've zeroed it at 100 yards. All right, that's my typical kind of hunting rifle zero. There's benefits or advantages. You could do like a 200-yard zero. Pick one, and then if you use this app to understand it, then both work great. You need to know, you see barrel twist. This barrel is a 1 in 8 twist. That means it's making a complete rotation, like one rotation. The bullet is every 8 inches. And so the barrel twist on this is a 1 in 8. It's marked on this barrel. Sometimes it's not marked on your barrel, but the manufacturer's website is going to tell you what the twist rate is. It does matter, so please punch that in correctly. For the bullet here, you can see, I already told you, Federal Terminal Ascent, 130 grain, and so I was able to select this from the bullet library. I was able to go in, I was able to select library, manufacturer, and got this, should be going along in the video, right? So we go Federal, and it's a 130 grain bullet, and then you can see there, Federal Terminal Ascent 130. So just like that, punches it in, I hit save, and now that bullet is saved in my armory in the app, and then goes down. All right, I told you that this box says 2,800 feet per second, all right? I use the chrono, so to give you an example of the difference, my 130 grain bullets were going 2,708 feet per second, all right? So that's, you know, 92 feet per second less, you know, for that 6 inches of bullet. And so there's some math there, but that's real world data on the chrono, validated. All right, we're not gonna turn like anything fancy. We're just trying to go straight. We're trying to keep this as simple as we can for the first video series of this. Now, optic. I was able to go in and actually select the optic for my rifle. So you can see I have the Razor LHT, and it tells me all the details. It's an MRAD, it's a mil reticle, mil radian. It's first focal plane, gives me min and max magnification, and then the scope tube diameter, and then the scope height. That's the height of the center of the scope to the center of the bore. This app has a really cool tool that you can actually measure that, or you can just use a tape measure. Whatever floats your boat, but keep it easy. This is 2.75 inches, so the center line of this scope over the center line of the bore, 2.75 inches. And you can see the camera symbol right there to the left of that. That's how you would go and measure it. Pretty cool. Muzzle device, all right, I told you I have a Silence Co Mega 300 on here, and if you do want to do a 0 with the suppressor off or on, you can actually do one with it off and then add the muzzle device. So you can go from no muzzle device to one, and then you can account for the point of impact shift on when you attach that muzzle device. I've hunted suppressed for years, so it stays on the gun. All right, and so I've got all that set up, and the bottom you see under corrections, this will come into play later in the series, right? So that'll be when we go on a real range, real life shooting, and then we validate that the bullet hits where the app says it is, and we can true that in the app through either adjusting the velocity or adjusting the ballistic coefficient. It's a later video. All right, we entered in all our data. It's all known inputs. It's a math problem. The correct inputs equal the correct output. So now I'm back to the main screen. How do we start this video? I'm not comfortable making a shot on a deer, let's say at 300 yards. So I punch inner range, 300 yards. All right, that tells me 1.1 mils, you see up. So on this scope, I have two options. I can either A, hold over it, I'm gonna show you that in a minute, or B, I can dial that. And so dialing it, on this scope, I would just lift up, I'll run the B-roll that'll show this, and then I would just spin it over to 1.1 and drop it down. Now, if I dialed it, then I just hold center. I'm just holding center in the crosshairs, nothing changes how I would aim, there's no holdover, I've dialed in my hold. So I ranged that deer, it was at 300 yards, I punched 300 in, and it was on my app, 1.1, hold center, shoot the deer, great time. Or I can do a holdover, so I can keep it back at 0, and I can go into my app. So now I've ranged the deer, it's at 300, it tells me 1.1, well what does that look like in my optic? Well, I can hit that GeoBallistics button right above its reticle, I hit reticle, and then bam, there's my reticle that's in this scope on a deer target. And you can adjust, you see like where it says deer, you can make that a circle, you can make that an IPSC, you can make it a square, a diamond. Pretty awesome. I'll just show you real fast, right? So there's like the different kind of options. So I had deer, and then here's the magnification. So I told you on a first focal plane scope that the reticle enlarges as you zoom in. So you can see I'm down on 4.5 magnification. You can see on the top right of the reticle, there's 4.5. And then watch this. So just like I would zoom in on my actual scope, this is it through the magnification range all the way up to 22. And so now I see the deer, and then it told me 1.1 mils. And so it's showing me where that circle, the orange circle on the target is where I'm trying to impact that deer at 350 yards. All right, you know, maybe a little bit high for you, maybe a little bit low, you know, maybe that vital I may drop a little bit. But you see on I'm gonna zoom in here, which we're actually, all right, so you see the 1 line, that's 1 mil, and so I'm holding right above that 1 mil line, just above, because I'm at 1.1. All right, and you can see on a first focal plane scope how the 200, those are my holds, like that's, if I zoom, and no matter what range, my 1 mil is 284 yards, 2 mils 402, and you see that 3 mils is 504, and so on. And so it gives me those are constant. What I am gonna do is I'm gonna punch a second focal plane scope in, and I'm gonna have that over to the side here in about 5 seconds of this video, and I'm gonna show you what happens on a second focal plane scope. Those yard lines, instead of staying the same on a first focal plane scope, will actually adjust as I go through the magnification range. They are only the specific distance it describes in the hole, whether it's 1 mil or MOA, they're only that distance at certain magnifications. Like if it's normally like the max magnification of the scopes, if you're hunting with like a 4 to 12, it would be like at 12 power, then that's where the holds are accurate. Problem is, for me hunting, I rarely shoot anything near max magnification. If I haven't already shown the video, I shot the last buck that I hit at, you know, it was at 4.5 power, and I rarely am going over that on my farm. And so that's kind of the difference between first focal plane and second focal plane, but you can see that just by entering the data that we've entered so far, getting our scope just dialed in, getting it leveled, just getting it set up properly, and then taking the data from the box of ammunition, we can get pretty close, and then you, at 300 yards, this app's gonna show you right where to hold on the deer. And I think that's pretty awesome. You know, from a hunting standpoint, you weren't comfortable with it. What you should do, and this will be the next part of the video in the series, is, you know, don't just punch in all this stuff unless you're just under a crazy time crunch. Do this in the summer, or do it now, and then go practice throughout the year and go validate. And we're gonna show this in the future videos on what that looks like and how to true that data to make sure that if you want to take that 500-yard shot on maybe a larger, you know, mule deer or something like that, that's a little bit more vital, then, you know, you'll be comfortable doing so because you've gone out to the range and you know that your equipment is capable of that. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that was a crash course in a very simplistic way to say, hey, here's my scope, I've mounted it correctly to my rifle, how to punch in the data on an app. I showed you it's simple, it's got drop down menus that you can select if you're using Hornady, 143 ELDX, that bullet's in there. And so this is a very, very easy way for very low cost to be able to go make sure that you can make shots that are very effective on game, on steel, you know, with minimal equipment. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the series, you know, video where we go out and actually do this on the range. But if there's something I didn't cover that you want to know, or, you know, I didn't hit a certain amount of detail because I did this video in one take, please let me know. Drop in the comments, you know, like, subscribe, trying to make this stuff relevant for you. See you guys next time.